So we were saying at the end of yesterday's tutorial that the whole idea of the project is to generate a short URL to rickroll someone, and we're failing on a couple of points here because the short URL is not short, and also it's giving the game away as to what's going to happen when you actually access the link. So what we need to do in this tutorial is actually use a shorter URL that hides what we're doing, which is actually a lot shorter in length. So what I've actually done is I've done a lot of this work already, and simply because it's going over old ground that we've done in previous tutorials. So what we need to do is purchase the short domain name and then point it to our DigitalOcean droplet, and then finally set up Nginx so that when we receive any requests for it, we actually redirect to where we're going to. So essentially I've done this in previous tutorials, so I'm just quickly recap what I've done to set this up. So I found this domain name 51W site. It's not the best domain name, but it's reasonably short, and because this is just a hobby project, I don't want to spend thousands and thousands of dollars on a really short domain name. But essentially I've purchased this domain name through Namecheap, pointed it to our DigitalOcean server by updating the DNS records to point to the IP address of it, and then if we go over to the server, I've created an Nginx configuration file for it, where essentially for the domain name we're just going to, anything after the / of the domain, we're just going to directly point to our node application that's already running on the server. So this is quite handy. We don't need to go through the process of setting up another node application or anything. We've still got one running on the server. We're just proxying using Nginx any request to the domain name to the node app. And you might also see that I've installed an SSL certificate using Let's Encrypt. So if you're not sure about how to do any of those things, we did that in the start of the tutorial, the start of the series, so I'll put some links to those tutorials if you want to go back and revisit it. But essentially the domain should be set up and ready to go now. So if we go ahead and generate a new rick'n'roll URL, so let's go ahead there. You can see here we've still got the long domain name, sorry, but we've got the ID of the domain, and if we want to access the stats for that, we would go across to here. And you can see there's no stats there at the moment. But if we were to copy this whole link, this should still work. So this is the long version of the domain. So that will redirect us rather to the YouTube video. So if we refresh the stats, that's still working. It's given us the access and location of where that was accessed from. But if we test out our new domain, we should be able to do the same thing. So let me just grab the short URL ID. So now if we go ahead and it's go to 51W site and then / the actual ID of the short URL and hit that, we should find that we're still redirected to the same place as well, and that should have also populated our stats. So if we just refresh that as well, you can see we've got another access a few seconds later. So that's just a quick overview of what we've needed to do to get the short domain set up. And as I say, it's just going over old ground, and it's just a case of purchasing a domain, pointing it to the DigitalOcean server and making the necessary configurations in Nginx. So if we go ahead and have a look at the Nginx config again, you can see how you can use Nginx to point different domains to the same applications that are running on your server. But also if you had web content as well, you could point domains to the same folders of web content and then maybe split it up into different things depending on the path that's passed in. But we'll leave it there for this tutorial. In the next tutorial, we're going to dip back into the code and just update our environment files so that when the user generates a new short URL, it's going to be using the new short domain that we've just set up. But that's it for this tutorial. Make sure you stay tuned for more web dev tips.